Good Friday to you. I hope you have a great weekend planned. We have a great Friday show, weekend review show planned, which we begin on Weeks When We Are Lucky with John Ellis, founder and editor-in-chief of News Items, which is indispensable for smart people around the country. John always sends me 4 or 5 stories on a Friday morning that he thinks have not been covered. And I want to go in reverse order, John, simply because I want to juxtapose King Bear, that's the stampede into bearish tech funds yesterday, with the monarch butterfly. Now, I've been covering the AI bubble all week, so we can put that aside. Tell us about the monarch butterfly.
Well, there's tracking the migration pattern of a monarch butterfly has been a challenge for scientists and ornithologists for not ornithologists, but people who study butterflies for years.
Entomologists.
And that,
yep.
There you go. And a small company, has built a tiny device that now enables the tracking of butterflies as they go from north to south in the wintertime. The great thing about this is that the same tiny tracking device can be put on birds of all kinds. So we'll have a much greater knowledge of how birds migrate, when they migrate, to where they migrate. It's a bonanza for people who are interested in these things. And it's not just, by the way,
go ahead. It's not just a bonanza to every zoologist.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's ants, it's all sorts of insects, it's butterflies, and birds. My brother's a big birder, so he's terribly excited about it. It's going to lead bird news items tomorrow.
All right. Now, the other story I referenced was from the Journal this morning. There was a stampede into this bearish tech fund yesterday. The ProShares Ultra Pro Short QQQ fund had $12 billion flow into it. Now, I'm not in the market, so I have no opinions on this. Have you been watching the market with concern over the AI bubble?
I think it can be both a wonderful opportunity and a bubble at the same time. The danger is that if you invest in, say, Google, and they're building out all of these data centers at enormous cost, what you're really worried about if you're an investor is the amount of money they're pouring into data centers, because it's entirely possible that someone will come along with a new technology and better chips and so on and so forth that make those data centers a stranded investment. So that's the real
the blockbuster videos of 2050. Let me go to the second story you sent. Bitcoin in free fall. I checked right before we went on the air. It's at 84,000 and change right now. I've never understood it. I've never touched it because I don't understand it. What's your 30,000-foot view of the landscape of crypto?
Well, crypto has been something for enthusiasts, and then the major investment companies like BlackRock and so on and so forth created Bitcoin ETFs. So you could trade Bitcoin now immediately, right? You could go and you say, I'll buy it at 11 and then I'll sell it at 12. You can do that. On October 6th, Bitcoin was trading at $126,000. Today, it's, as you said, somewhere around $83,000. So 40-something thousand dollars have disappeared in 6 weeks. There's a limited amount of Bitcoin. There's 20 million Bitcoin out there, roughly speaking. To give you some idea, there are 12 billion outstanding shares of Google. So in the case of Bitcoin, if, let's say, I don't know, 1 million people decide $1 million worth decide to get out, that has an enormous effect on the price of Bitcoin. And the concern is that it will generate what's called a cascade sell-off. So you and I own Bitcoin. We decide to borrow money to buy more Bitcoin. Bitcoin goes down. Suddenly we have to not just sell the Bitcoin, we have to sell other assets in order to cover the margin call. And that's the concern now. It's dropped so far so fast that there's a measure. Actually, Wall Street has a graph for everything. There's a graphic that categorizes fear about Bitcoin, and right now it's in the extreme fear mode. So
I am just glad not to be part of that world. Let me turn to the Fox News poll. that you report confirms other polling. President Trump is down where President Obama and President Bush were in their at the end of the first year of their second term, just above 40%. I don't think it's going to change much, John, until the economy kicks in. If the one big beautiful bill does what it says it's going to do.
Yeah, I mean, the killer for all any president is inflation. Inflation did in Richard Nixon. Inflation did Jerry Ford, Jimmy Carter, Joe Biden. Trump is presiding over whether it's real or not. It's perceived as biting inflation. People are finding the prices of things high, so his poll numbers understandably have gone down. The good news for him is that his poll numbers have not gone down among Republicans. So he's not seeing a defection of his party's folks, and particularly he's not seeing any defections among those Republicans who vote in primaries. So, if the Republicans were not in control of the Senate and the House, then he would be in a much more difficult situation than he is right now.
Now I want to go to the first story because it's the most interesting story you sent. Jeffrey Epstein. We've been focused on the stunt double legislation that is just silly, but you're focused on the fact, and I'm astonished that I didn't know this. He wired out of his private bank $1.1 billion. Do we know who he
That was
sent a billion one to?
Well, that's the question, right? I mean, the we've been trying to figure out how it is that Jeffrey Epstein, amassed a fortune of roughly $650 million. And the answer to what his business was he proffered tax advice, quote unquote. And then he was a quote middleman, end quote, in various deals all around the world. Um, so first of all, there are very good tax firms and very good legal firms that can provide much, much better, much deeper tax advice for a lot less than what Jeffrey Epstein was supposedly charging. The second thing is, if you want to do a deal, if you have a big deal, you go to Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan Chase or whoever it is, and that's their business, and they do big deals, particularly with big clients like sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East. So the story that Jeffrey Epstein was making all this money while he was doing an annual run rate of $50 million dollars a year. So he's spending $50 million dollars a year. He's amassed a $650 million fortune. And you say to yourself, you can't possibly do that offering tax advice and being a secondary or even tertiary player in the brokerage market, the deal brokerage market. So one thing that we're interested in, particularly interested in the release of the Epstein files, is an explanation of how he made all this money. The New York Times has done very good reporting on this, but they've just scratched the surface, and they were the ones who revealed that Epstein had wired out. Okay, so he's a guy advising people on taxes, and he's a guy who's doing middlemen, and he's wiring out of his J.P. Morgan Chase account 1.1 billion, another 400 million from I think from the Bank of America, et cetera. The whole wire out adds up to 1.8 billion dollars. Generally
Wow.
speaking, I don't know about you, but if I were offering tax advice, I would think that the wires would be coming to me as compensation for my services.
Yeah,
1.8
you
billion
can run
went
an
out.
escrow company. You can run an escrow company and have a lot of in and out, but he's not an escrow company. I'm not sure
No,
what he held himself out to be. That's a lot of money. I don't know the origin of it, and I don't know where it goes, but immediately my spidey sense says money laundering. Isn't that what you think?
I totally. I mean, I have a whole elaborate conspiracy theory about it, which I won't share, but yes, there's no other explanation, it seems to me. I just can't imagine what the other explanation could possibly be, because A, his tax advice is not that valuable, and B, if you want to do a big deal, hire Goldman Sachs.
I agree. And if you are surrounded by the glitterati and you're living the life that $50 million allows you to live, it is unlikely that you're going to get pegged as a money launderer unless they're really watching their trigger transactions at the banks. And he did not seem to have a lot of oversight even after he was convicted. John Ellis, great stories today. Get news items every morning, or 6 days a week, I should be to be specific, in your mailbox before 7 a.m., sometimes it's 6, and you'll be as well read as anyone on the planet. That's why the smart people subscribe to news items. Thank you, John. As is our want on Good Fridays, we have Eli Lake with us. Eli writes for the Free Press. He's the host of the Breaking History podcast. Eli, I want to cover with you a history series that is not your own. Have you watched Death by Lightning?
Not yet, but it's on my list. Everyone tells me it's fantastic.
It is, but in it, one of the characters from the James Garfield assassination saga asks, and I won't spoil it beyond that, will history remember me? And it's an interesting question because it's set in 1880, 145 years ago. 145 years from now, history is going to be compressed to like 2 paragraphs for our era. Who's going to be in those 2 paragraphs, Eli?
Donald Trump, for sure. And that's the only sure name that I can think of. I think the legacy of Trump's going to be enormous.
I think Trump and Xi Jinping has been my answer. Jim Talon also suggested that the remaking of the Middle East will be the story of the first quarter of
Netanyahu,
our century.
It
might be Netanyahu too.
Yeah.
Now I want to go to a question. I expected that answer. Now I want to go. Yeah. You posted earlier today, if you are not a Zionist, then something is deeply wrong with you. I agree with that, but I want to know your reasoning, and I'll tell you mine.
Very clearly, because Zionism is simply the belief that the Jewish people have a right to a state that now already exists. That I just want to reframe it. I've become so frustrated. You caught me today in the middle of writing a script and an editorial that will be out at the Free Press soon about the horrible attack at the Park East Synagogue in Manhattan and the absolutely chilling response, in my view, from the mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani. So it was on my mind, and I want to reframe it. I mean, the idea that Zionism is a toxic concept when it just means Israel should exist, a state that continues to exist. That if you are an anti-Zionist, you want to destroy the only Jewish state in the world, to me, that should be the toxic position, not the other way around. And it is just, I'm despondent that the left has largely succeeded, at least in younger generations, in kind of, reframing what that word means.
No, I am a Zionist because I like strong allies for the United States. But I also point out to people who are so-called anti-Zionists, are you against the Republic of Ireland because it was a native people ruled by a colonial power? Are you against India and Pakistan, countries that are independent sovereign countries that were ruled by a colonial power? Walk around Africa, and why not the first peoples of the Middle East, the Jews, with their home country? And do they ever confront that? Eli, does anyone ever come up with the fact that the archaeology, when we do our land acknowledgments in Israel, they ought to begin with, we want to acknowledge the Israelis?
No, of course not. I mean, listen, this is a longer conversation, but, they are manipulating the debate with a bunch of things that are not true and selective cherry picking of things. War is awful. Hamas started that war, but they want to say that it's a genocide and ignore the fact that it was started with an absolutely gruesome massacre that any sovereign nation would have responded to. And I think that Israel, in retrospect, probably responded with more restraint than a lot of other countries, a lot of our allies would have responded. So the idea that the conduct of a country defending itself after October 7th it now constitutes a genocide. Anyone who thinks 3 steps ahead would realize that that would be a problem for America. It would be a problem for America and its allies. But that's the sort of level of the debate we're in, and people can't think past that. And it is extremely frustrating to see that a sizable number of Americans have bought into that garbage.
Now, can you state the facts of what happened at the synagogue? I read the story last night. I posted immediately. Harmeet Dillon has got to dispatch Civil Rights Division lawyers there to investigate, because I believe it is not unlike police departments in cities that are indifferent to the rights of their minorities end up under court supervision pursuant to a consent decree. What happened there?
Okay, so there's an organization called Pal Adwa, which earlier in February of this year went to the Orthodox Jewish neighborhood of Borough Park and did a similar kind of operation, which they said they were flooding Borough Park, and they rely on a lie, basically. What they said is that the synagogue was hosting something called Nefesh B'Nefesh. That's an organization that exists to help facilitate for Jews that would like to emigrate to Israel or make Aliyah, the sort of details in the process for doing that. It is not an organization that is, as they claimed, selling stolen Palestinian land. It was not a sale of any land at all in the synagogue event. So they spread the lie, and then they bring people to basically kind of form a menacing mob that swarms the people that are walking into the temple. That to me is so deeply un-American. It violates that our a fundamental principle of who we are as a country, which is religious liberty, that we are a place where you can worship freely and, without the threat of some other group. So that itself is breaking a social compact. But the real problem, because there are always going to be nutbags, the real problem is the incoming mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, put out an equivocation kind of statement where he said he tone policed this radical organization that called for this protest, saying, I wouldn't have used that language, gave lip service to the idea that people should kind of, go to their house of worship in peace, but then said, and houses of worship should not be used for events that violate international law, which is unbelievable. By putting that out there, what he's doing is he's laundering the lie of this organization. And it's a signal. He doesn't want to really offend groups that believe that social justice means yelling at pious religious Jews on their way to synagogue. I am utterly offended. Shame on Zohran Mamdani. And sadly, I think it's a symbol of what's coming.
Now, what do you think of by the way, it is illegal everywhere to assault someone. Yep. Assault doesn't mean touching. It means the imminent fear of an unpermitted touching. So I think the synagogue goers were assaulted. But I also believe if you have systemic bias in any police department or its leadership at the level of elected officials, you end up in court facing a consent decree. Normally it's white cops, black population, but it would fit to any civil rights. I would like to see this investigation begun in New York City. I think we have a predicate.
Well, I would not. I actually don't. I'm against that because I don't like the consent decrees usually. They've been abused by past justice departments. And Jessica Tisch, I do think, is trying to do the right thing right now. And at least for now, Mamdani has kept her on. However, this organization, Pal Adwa of New York and New Jersey, they should absolutely come under the microscope of the Justice Department because I would like to know where they're getting their money from. They're a 501c3 nonprofit, and this is what they do. They organized rallies to go into Jewish neighborhoods, into Jewish synagogues, and try to harass and intimidate Jews as they're on their way to services. So I would like to know more about where they get their money from. I've started doing a little research on them. They are connected to an organization called Samadoun. They praised October 7th multiple times on their social media. They're not for two states. They're for one state. They're on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eli, always good talking to you. We are expecting my breaking history for the long Thanksgiving holiday before that begins. Follow him at Eli Lake, and by all means, like and subscribe to Breaking History. Subscribe to the Free Press, and Matt Continetti is my guest. Matt, there's a bear behind you. Did you go out and kill a bear to celebrate moving to the Wall Street Journal? What is that?
I think that bear you're referring to, Hugh, is the bank of the Potomac River in this wonderful AEI scene I have behind me. But I always love your interest in my backgrounds. I think you pay particular attention to my backgrounds as opposed to the other guests you have on your show.
I do, because they're always that looks like a bear that you went out and shot. When you,
so Johnny, if I move this way, you'll see AEI. Maybe that'll be better.
Tell me something. Congratulations on the move to the Wall Street Journal. What is your new duty over there?
Well, I'll be writing columns for the Wall Street Journal. I'll be part of a new expansion that the journal editorial page is undertaking, and which will launch soon. And in the meantime, I'm writing pieces regularly for the paper. I should have one in the Weekend Journal coming out pretty soon.
I'm excited about that. Say hello to Jack Butler, Hugh Hewitt Show intern extraordinaire many years ago, Hillsdale grad, good friend of the program. So we're stacking the journal. Now I want to do the first 2028 conversation of the cycle with Matt Continetti, because Axios reported yesterday that Senator Ted Cruz is, quote, laying the groundwork for a 2028 presidential bid by leaning into his feud with Tucker Carlson, by poking fun at Carlson's isolationist foreign policy view, accusing him of anti-Semitism and more. Cruz is putting himself on a collision course with Vice President Vance. Now, Matt, Vice Presidents don't get free passes. Mondale got challenged by Hart. Quayle did not make it out of the starting gates in 00. H.W. Bush, when it came time to succeed Ronald Reagan, got challenged by Bob Dole. Do you expect a full and fair, robust set of primaries?
I think we'll have primaries. I don't know how robust they will be. H.W., Reagan's vice president, did elicit several competitors in 1988, and he was the front runner, and he ended up with the nomination and, of course, the presidency. Al Gore, in 1999, as he laid the framework to succeed Bill Clinton, he also elicited a challenge from Senator Bill Bradley. Gore was a frontrunner at the start. He ended up with the nomination, of course, lost to George W. Bush. So I do think that J.D. Vance is the prohibitive favorite for the Republican nomination in 2028. But I also expect that we'll see challenges, whether it's from Senator Cruz or whether it's from Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, or who knows, might lay a groundwork for a challenge against J.D. Vance.
Now, of my short list, I have Cruz now on it, Rubio sort of on it, depending on what Donald Trump says, maybe Governor DeSantis back for the second time around the track, maybe Senator Cotton, maybe former Secretary Pompeo. Is there anyone else you list as a maybe?
No, I think that about does it. A lot depends on what the situation is, Hugh, a year from now, after the midterms, and depending on the relative strength of President Trump, and that means the strength of J.D. Vance, you might get more figures into the race. And Josh Hawley of Missouri, of course, the senator, has presidential ambitions. He says he's not going to run in 2028, but if something changes, someone like Hawley may well throw his hat into the ring as well.
And I neglected to mention Glenn Youngkin. There have got to be governors out there besides Governor Youngkin as well. Let me move to story number 2. Yesterday was the saying farewell to Vice President Dick Cheney at the National Cathedral. Very moving ceremony. The old guard, the people who have been part of the country's history for a very long time. He was remembered as a very serious, tough, and loyal man who did his one job very well, whether it was SecDef or number 2 to W. Bush. Now the question, have you watched Death by Lightning yet?
I have not. It's on my watch list. I'm too busy writing for the Wall Street Journal.
Well, in Death by Lightning, one of the characters, it's a fabulous 4-part series
That's what I
about
hear.
the assassination.
I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely great. Candace Millard wrote a great book, and my wife and I inhaled it years ago. And when my son told me it had been made into a book, into a series, I didn't know how Netflix could do it, but they did it. But in the course of that, one of the characters that will remain nameless asks, will history remember me? And what I'm going to get from Matt during the break is, who will history remember? That's 145 years ago, 1880, 1881. So 145 years from now, in sometime around 2150, who exactly will history be recording as having been significant in the era of which we are part? Matt, who matters in 150 years from now? Who will be the subject of whatever is Netflix on whatever platform exists in 150 years?
Well, I think it's heads of state. So obviously President Trump will be remembered 150 years from now. Vladimir Putin 150 years from now. Xi Jinping, and probably Erdogan of Turkey. I think those are probably the figures who are going to have the longest lasting impression in the histories.
Erdogan is interesting. That's on my list for the next subject here, because Saudi Arabia has been in town this week and traffic's been a nightmare with the Crown Prince being here. Who's more important to our future, Erdogan or the Crown Prince?
Well, I think they're connected, Hugh. I think they're both connected. Erdogan's Turkey is a growing power. He is increasing his influence in the Middle East. That's part of the Syria play. He's also increasing his opposition to Israel. And so I think becoming a node in the next version of the anti-Israel network in the Middle East. And so that's why we need allies like Saudi Arabia. We need Saudi Arabia to balance out forces like Iran, but also potentially forces like Turkey. And so I think we do need MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, on America's side. You know, we've had a long relationship with the Saudis in the United States. It's never been pretty, never. But it's of necessity. And I think the necessity continues. In some cases, that's because of oil. Not so much anymore because President Trump has made us energy independent, though our allies still need oil from the Middle East. But I think right now it's about investment, and especially investment in these data centers and factories that are going to make the chips and increase our technological edge and self-sufficiency over China.
Now, I keep hoping someday Erdogan will revert to the mean of Ataturk and be secular. Highly unlikely. Are they really an ally?
Well, sometimes it's very hard to tell. There are powers like this, of course. You talk about Qatar, one of the Gulf states, that plays the role of an American ally, houses American troops, and yet also is very friendly with Iran, of course, a supporter of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan's Turkey is somewhat similar. It means that we can work with them on some issues, but we also need to be very careful about the technology that we provide Erdogan's Turkey, about the financial incentives we give them. They're a major power. They need to be respected, but they also need to be watched very carefully.
I think we will be doing that. Matt, I want to play for you in the audience a 90-second video of 6 Democrats. Their message has become quite controversial, elicited a strong response from President Trump. Here is that video.
I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris Deluzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow. I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
and the intelligence community
who take risks each day
to keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens. Like us, you all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law
or our Constitution.
We know this is hard and that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
the Army,
or Navy,
the Air Force,
your vigilance is critical.
And know that we have your back.
Because now, more than ever,
the American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws,
our Constitution,
and who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up the ship.
Matt Continetti, Don't Give Up the Ship is famously associated with the Battle of Lake Erie, in which the Buckeyes took an entire British squadron in the War of 1812. But what this is about, it's an outrageous video, and it fried me, because it says the threats are right here at home to our Constitution. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders. What do you think they were trying to say?
I think what they were trying to say was that Donald Trump is either already ordering the military and intelligence community to do illegal things, or is about to order the military and the intelligence community to do illegal things. I think it's an example of gaslighting. None of the legislators involved have been able to point to a single unlawful order this president has given. This president has obeyed court orders when he's told that he needs to stop a process, or most of the time he's allowed to do it as those processes work up to the Supreme Court. And so I think it lacks evidence. I think it uses the same rhetoric this enemy within rhetoric that the Democrats condemn whenever Donald Trump uses it. And I also think it puts the troops in a very awkward position. If the legislators are so concerned, what are they doing? Why is the onus on the individual soldier or case officer? It should be Congress that should be raising the alarm and trying to stop the president. So I think it's both kind of imposing on our troops and condescending to them at the same time. I think it's a very inflammatory and disturbing exercise.
Wildly irresponsible. There are 1.3 million people in uniform. There's going to be a least bright member of the 1.3 million. There's going to be a Gomer pile. And you show that to the wrong person, and they are going to feel empowered. And when they say, we've got your back, no, they don't. They don't have anybody's back. They're legislators.
Here's what kind of got my attention. I have nothing but respect for our troops, for our uniformed soldiers, and for our intelligence officers. But I'd also know that the intelligence community, when it comes to Donald Trump, has not behaved responsibly over the past decade.
Correct.
And so when I hear Alexis Slotkin say, I have your back, I kind of hear, hey, next Vindman, next whistleblower who wants to do something to screw up Trump in his last 2 years in office, we're right there waiting for you. Not to the troops necessarily, but to the people who are opposed to this president working in the FBI and the CIA. That's kind of what got my attention. And again, eliding that distinction between them and the uniformed soldiers who are trained to disobey unlawful orders. This is not anything our soldiers don't already know, which makes the whole exercise even more egregious to me.
The most interesting story is whose idea was it, and how did they persuade otherwise apparently smart people to join in? Because while Donald Trump exploded on Truth Social and they're trying to make themselves victim now, the reality is it was profoundly irresponsible. Last topic, the AI bubble. The sell-off has stopped in NVIDIA and Palantir as of this hour. The AI trade is not as stinky as it's been for 3 weeks. But what do you think, Matt? That was a very weird 3 weeks we've been through when both NVIDIA and Palantir report earnings that blow the socks off any other company, and their stock goes down.
Well, Hugh, I'm the very definition of a passive long-term investor, so I'm not going to go Jim Cramer on you with any insight or lack thereof into the stock market. But I will say that even if there is an AI bubble, AI is still a transformative technology. And these companies are different than kind of the companies during the dot-com boom, which I remember, where you'd have a website but no income and still get a high stock evaluation. What I think is more important politically is the way in which voters are interacting with this economy. And because of the prices and because of interest rates, you have this widespread feeling among many American voters, especially kind of the low propensity parts of the Trump coalition, that this economy is not working for them. And that, unless President Trump and the Republicans address that, they're in for a very difficult midterm election in 2026.
So, Matt, last question. If there is an AI bubble and it deflates and it leaves some people with big losses on paper, who gets blamed? Because it's really got nothing to do with political people. It's got to do with market forces and getting over your skis. Do the Republicans still get splattered?
Yes. I have a rule. If Republicans are in power, they get blamed for everything. So, yes.
Yep. They cannot immunize themselves. They can talk about it as much as they want, but they're not going to escape the Grim Reaper if the market continues its march south next week. Matt Continetti, follow him on X at Continetti. Read him in the Wall Street Journal. Congratulations on the new gig. We look forward to seeing you on the Wall Street Journal Roundtable as well when it appears on Fox News. Thank you, Matt. It is Relief Factor time in the Relief Factor studio. I've got my Carrie Kirkman and Retron Omega. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, it's right there. And the reason I do, because, of course, I've got tree trunk Teddy all weekend long. I'm packing up the car early in the morning, taking care of him tomorrow, which means basically lifting a sack of grain 100 times. So I'll probably take 6 packs with me to do one day of babysitting, but looking forward to it. It's going to be great. If you want to try Relief Factor and put away the over-the-counters, the Advil, the ibuprofen, the aspirin, call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Ask for the starter pack. It's $19.95, less than $1 a day. You will love it. It will get rid of those minor aches and pains that come from exercise and aging. You should be doing the former, especially on the weekend. You're definitely doing the latter. Or just go to their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. While I talk about website, let me remind you of webroot.com/Hewitt. Webroot.com/Hewitt. Right now, they are running a big special off Webroot Total Protection, 60% off Webroot Total Protection at webroot.com/Hewitt. This holiday season is when the scammers come out, the phishing men come out, PHISHING. You need real-time antivirus protection. You need a firewall. You need Web Threat Shield to block malicious sites before you go there. Password Manager helps as well, as does a System Optimizer or VPN, and identity protection by advanced monitoring of the deep web. Get protected in the era of cyber criminals living everywhere, always 24/7, 365 from every country in the world, aimed at your computer, your device. You'd have one person covered by Webroot Total Protection with 5 different devices, or 10 people covered for 10 devices. Go to webroot.com/Hewitt for details, 60% off. Let me also remind you of Consumer Cellular, while I have a chance, save you some money going into the weekend and the holidays. Consumer Cellular can be reached at 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Remember my code, HUGH25. That's worth $5 a month off your bill for the first 5 months that you're enrolled with Consumer Cellular. And here's the deal. You can have savings without sacrificing quality. Same great quality as the web provider, the cell phone provider you're using right now, at a fraction of the cost, especially if you're over 50. You might have signed up because over 50 people are a little bit more cautious than other people, and they want unlimited data plans, and usually they get upsold by cell phone companies, and you buy way too much data. 2 unlimited data lines. All right, keep your number, keep your identity, keep your contacts. Very easy to do. Takes 20 minutes to switch. 2 of those lines for $60 a month. But no matter what your age is, not just 50 and older, call 1-800-411-4454 or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh and ask for the U25 code. Get that extra $25 off, $5 off each of the first 5 invoices, and save money every month. It's Friday. Ben Domenech is in the house. He is, of course, editor-at-large for The Spectator, host of the Big Ben podcast, a must-listen-to weekly podcast, which was very funny this week because, Ben, Patton Oswalt is one of those guys who's never going to win the spelling bee. And he and Seth Rogen and David Simon occasionally get into a tussle with me on X. And there's nothing to be done for these guys. They've never read anything in their lives. How can Patton Oswalt go on Bill Maher's show and not know about the grooming thing?
Well, the thing that sticks out to me about this is, you know how there's this whole, this faction of people within Hollywood who are branded as nerds, and they sort of fill in these categories. Obviously, Patton Oswalt is very famous for playing a role where he gave a speech about Star Wars to the Parks and Rec crew. The problem is they're nerds who actually don't know anything. And as someone who made a lot of friends while building computers growing up, let me tell you, the difference between not knowing anything as a nerd and just having kind of that as your veneer versus actually knowing things is a pretty big difference. And unfortunately, these guys just have that veneer. They're dumb enough to play nerds on TV, but they actually don't know anything about what they're talking about. And that gives them, I think, the confidence and hubris to just sort of say, well, I can answer any question. I can go on to anything. And to be, by the way, completely incurious about what Maher is saying, was what stuck out.
Oh, he had a little bit of a deer in the headlights look.
Yep.
Like, please don't ask me anything. Tell me more. Tell me more. That brings me to a television series, Death by Lightning. Have you and Mrs. Dominich watched it yet?
So I, as is very typical of me, I begin a series with my wife, and then she speeds ahead while I, overloaded with work, have to wait until the following weekend to catch up. And she has watched it and really likes it.
It's fabulous. And Nick Offerman from Parks and Rec, for the benefit of the Steelers fan, steals the show as Chester Arthur. But
absolutely,
it is, what's really great about it is that one of the characters asks, "Will anyone remember us?" And it's set in 1880, so it made me think, okay, that's 145 years ago. Go forward 145 years. Who's going to be remembered in 2160 from right now, Ben?
Wow, that's actually a great question. I mean, obviously, the seniors in terms of their position who are currently exiting the stage, like Nancy Pelosi, will be remembered. Donald Trump will obviously be remembered. J.D. Vance, I think, will be remembered, and beyond. But one thing that I think is actually a really big question is how or whether the Squad will be remembered. The role that they have within this Democratic coalition is a very questionable one, and I'm just not sure whether it's going to be one that turns out necessarily the way that they think. And they are all poised to seize the reins of power in the wake of Schumer and Pelosi headed to the exits. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to, and I think that you may see actually instead a Democratic Party that reasserts kind of its old classic approach to things of picking someone that they think can appeal beyond the coast, but who actually can't, someone like Gavin Newsom. And that, to me, is a question about whether the Squad ends up being not remembered, a flash in the pan, a movement that is forgotten like so many have been politically over the years in American politics.
I'm going to come back to 2028 in just a moment, but I do note that in that series, in the first hour, there are characters like Senator Blaine and a bunch of different politicos who don't matter and do matter. Not many people last, but yesterday was the funeral of Vice President Cheney. I think he's a significant figure in American history and will be remembered by historians as such. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he will be, but I also wonder whether and how he will be remembered, Hugh, because the truth is that he ended up being surrounded, in his being laid to rest by a bunch of people who, throughout his political career, hated him, lied about him, called him every name in the book, and basically decried him as being the absolute worst in American politics. And then only because of his and his family's break with Donald Trump at the very last, turned and switched their positions on him. And I'm not sure which aspect will be, kind of cemented in the history books. Is it the version of him that was, loving the fact that he was being compared to Darth Vader and things like that? Is it the version of him that, had a certain mindset toward the Middle East that people, will be debating for ages to come? Or is it the version of him that is kind of in the latter stages where he's just remembered as being, this was someone who was a pivot point of the Republican coalition one way or the other?
I think it'll be because the archetype of serious, sober, very, very smart, with a worldview that is fixed and doesn't much care about polling, is an archetype for which Americans long every now and then. And every now and then we want someone who will do the job seriously without concern for X. Man never touched digital stuff. He had nothing to do with it. And so I'm putting aside his contretemps with Trump and just focusing on the vice presidential years, the year of Secretary of Defense.
Well,
Now, go ahead.
Just to add one more point about that, I think a big point of connection here, too, is to sort of think about how is Don Rumsfeld going to be remembered? And I think that there's a lot of different ways to remember a figure of such significance and controversy and things like that. I think he's a fascinating figure in American political life. But, it's hard to see into the future and say, this is the position that they are going to occupy. These are the people who are going to go back and study both the good decisions they made and the bad and what they're going to come away with. Because I quite honestly, the way that our educational systems are going, I'll be impressed if people can remember that they existed.
Yeah, when President Bush gave his eulogy yesterday, he pointed out that Vice President Cheney had been the only man elected to national office from the Mountain West. I was kind of taken aback by that, but he really is a Western character. Ronald Reagan was California, but sort of Western character. He's a Western character and is an archetype for a long time. But since we're talking presidential politics, Axios kicked it off, Ben. I didn't kick it off. Axios reported yesterday that Ted Cruz is, quote, laying the groundwork for a 2028 presidential bid by leaning into his feud with Tucker Carlson, by poking fun at Carlson's isolation and foreign policy view, accusing him of anti-Semitism and more. Cruz is putting himself on a collision course with Vice President Vance. True, false, or just Axios looking for clicks?
I think a little bit of all three, but I would just say that I have always assumed that Ted would run. It makes sense for him to run in the sense that he has run before and has laid the groundwork before, chose not to run, when he could have, I think, for the primary again. You saw Ron DeSantis inherit for good and for ill, a lot of the people who probably would have been a part of that team. And I think that there is an obvious sort of approach now for Ted that puts him, in the opposite position of a lot of these folks, and he's gotten, the further years of experience, I think, to make that run. At the same time, it's hard to see this playing out all that differently at this particular juncture than the fight that happened between Trump and DeSantis, which was a very abbreviated one. And I don't think we should be assuming that there's going to be a large faction of support for alternate candidates if, as we, I think, can fairly expect, if this is a successful administration, that the president will endorse his own VP and do so fairly early on. If that happens,
if the president wants to, if he wants to shut down primaries, he can say no debates, and the RNC won't rebuke it.
Yes.
But if he wants to play the apprentice,
exactly,
then
that's the choice. Does he want to have fun with this? Does he want to have fun with this? Does he want to be kind of on the sideline? Well, this guy is up, this guy's down. I saw what he said. I thought it was pretty good. That, I saw what he said, and that sounded stupid to me. And I think that that's going to be very tempting, perhaps for the president. Just given
if he signals that, you won't just get Cruz. You'll get DeSantis and Cotton and Pompeo and Glenn Youngkin. You might even get Marco Rubio, though that would be a little bit unusual from within an administration. You might get Greg Abbott. It would be wild. And I point out,
it would be wild. But you're leaving out. But you're leaving out the person that I told the New York Times this week that I thought would definitely be running, and that people should not underestimate. And that's one Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of strange new respect at the moment. I think that there's a very real possibility that someone will try to out MAGA J.D. Vance, and that could create some interesting tensions as well.
I'm buying puts on that, Ben. I'm buying puts on that. Speaking of buying puts and sells, is the AI retrenchment over, or has the bubble just begun to break? Because it's been a really wicked 3 weeks for artificial intelligence companies.
I think that the bubble is just beginning to break, but that's been something I anticipated happening a lot earlier, and I don't know whether it's actually upon us now, because I have skepticism of my own belief, just given how much the can has been kicked on it. I haven't heard your thoughts on that subject, but personally, I just have been waiting for it, just given what we know about the way that these companies work. And look, at a certain point, you're relying a lot on hope in terms of the directions and the investments that are going on.
Well, when one approaches 70, as I am, you do not invest in risky things. You're in T-bills and dividends. You don't do that. And so my view is the view of an older investor, not of someone who can afford to ride a couple of crashes down. Ben, I got a call during the break the last hour alerting me to the fact by a good loyal friend that the meeting between Mamdani and Trump was remarkable. Here's a clip from it.
We had a meeting today that actually surprised me. He wants to see no crime. He wants to see housing being built. He wants to see rents coming down, all things that I agree with. Now, we may disagree how we get there, the rent coming down. I think one of the things I really gleaned very much today, he'd like to see him come down, ideally, by building a lot of additional housing. Yeah. That's the ultimate way. He agrees with that, and so do I. But if I read the newspapers and the stories, I don't hear that. But I heard him say it today, and I think that's a very positive step. No, I don't expect. I expect to be helping him, not hurting him. A big help, because I want New York City to be great. Look, I love New York City. It's where I come from. I spent a lot of years there. Now I'm right here. We took a big setback with the mayor that we had, Dave de Blasio. I thought it was a tremendous setback for the city. I think this mayor can do some things that are going to be really.
What do you make of that, Ben Domenech?
Well, first off, I think that one of the big differences between the president and a lot of the people who, quite frankly, are in the business that we are in is that the president really does have a love and deep affection for the city of New York and does not just view it as being an item to be tossed around and debated by people on cable news. And that's something that I think has always motivated him. He does want to see the city succeed. He does want to see it come back, and he believes that it's been mismanaged, as he said about by Bill de Blasio and the like in the past. And I think he really does want to see all these things. But the truth is that, again, Mondani hasn't done anything. He's gotten elected. That's all. And that doesn't make you an actual good politician or effective politician. It is in no way a measure of your capability to govern something as unwieldy as the city of New York when you have essentially had no real job. You've been essentially a paid volunteer in a number of instances.
Well, my take on this, I'm a little cynical. I think Donald Trump is being very gracious because he's got nothing to lose by being very gracious.
I think
right?
That's correct. Yes, and it also provides him, I think, with the leeway to say after the fact, hey, I was willing to give him everything that he wanted when it came to trying to do all these things for the people, but all his ideas have sucked and they failed and they're bad, and have the position of not being negative before he even got started.
Yeah, and what he said is build more houses. That's not going to happen with Mondani as mayor. And so Trump set a bar of success out there. Mondani can't cross that bar.
No, he can't. And that's something that I think is just, it's not something that is going to, I think, engender any kind of faith in Mondani's approach to see the way that I expect him to fail to live up to the obligations and to all of the different promises that he has had to make along the way, not just to his DSA supporters, but to other voters that he needed to win over as well. He's promised everybody everything under the sun, and he's not going to be able to deliver on it.
No. Ben Domenech, host of the Big Ben podcast. Great conversation this week with Senator John Kennedy. Made me laugh a lot. Unfortunately, you taped it before the 90-second ad dropped by elected Democrats, with which I'm going to confront you now, Ben, because I am so angry about this, but I want to make sure the audience knows what we're talking about. This dropped 2 days ago.
I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris Deluzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow.
I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
and the intelligence community
who take risks each day
to keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens.
Like us. You all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law
or our Constitution.
We know this is hard
and that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
the Army,
or Navy,
the Air Force,
your vigilance is critical.
And know that we have your back.
Because now, more than ever,
the American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws,
our Constitution,
and who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up the ship.
Ben Domenech, your father-in-law was John McCain. I had Dan Harrigan on, a Ranger Green Beret West Point graduate, yesterday saying, what are they talking about? President Trump has not issued any illegal orders. I just think this is the most irresponsible thing I've seen done by, cooked up by some comms director who's 23 with purple hair.
This is absurd, and it's, I think, particularly absurd coming from the people who have the type of roster of experience that these people do, in the sense that you have a group of people out there who are absolute idiots in the Democratic Party who would claim things like that, and you understand that they are deeply unserious. But when you have people who lay out their records and say, this is where I served, this is what I did, this is how and then you take this seriously. And and no one should take this seriously, because that's not something that's happening. It's not something that's going on. It's fear-mongering. It's designed to create this false vision of everything that's going on in the country. And so spare me this argument that in some way Democrats are the more civically minded party at this point. It's just absolute insanity for them to go out and play games with this kind of thing, and it only foments the kind of insane behavior on the part of some factions of their voting cohort that we see. Instead of leaning into the idea that, hey, the truth is the president is testing the bounds of the Constitution from their perspective, and those tests are proving that the Constitution is strong, that the judiciary is strong, that there are pushbacks against it, there are checks and balances, et cetera. They should be saying that to their voters instead of this kind of fear-mongering designed to inflame people and designed to make everybody just react in a way that I think is just toxic for the whole conversation in a democratic republic.
I agree. I think it's also cowardly. Cowardly because they do not specify what they're talking about. And if you're a young 18-year-old E1, E2, and you see this video, you begin to think to yourself, what in the world are they talking about? And I do think they do damage to the good order of the military and to the confidence of the military and their higher-ups.
I completely agree, and I think that it's the kind of thing, again, that is just deeply irresponsible and squanders and uses these types of invocations in ways that they should not, but also I think squanders any kind of ability for those on the right to trust the institutions that we need to be able to have trust in and faith in order to look out for our interests and to defend, Americans without thought for party or partisan politics. It's bad in every way, and I do not know who is advising them to do this, but it's someone who doesn't understand that relationship at all, doesn't think it should be taken seriously, and just understands enough about it to be able to manipulate.
Oh, I would love an autopsy on who came up with the idea, who sold the idea, who peddled it around to the 6 members. It was a bad idea. Ben, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving between now and the next time we talk. Thank you for being here most Fridays, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you. I am thankful for you this coming Thanksgiving weekend.
I'm thankful for you, too, Hugh, and always I'm grateful to have the opportunity to join you. And thanks, as always, for listening.
Thank you, my friend. Do not go anywhere, America. A lot more coming ahead. I do want to remind you, speaking of Thanksgiving dinners, my friend Jan Gennara, and he's been my friend for 15 years and a very good one, wrote a book last year that became a surprise bestseller, Turning Small Talk into Big Talk. Publishers Weekly, Amazon Staff Selection. I've forgotten the long, long list of accolades that Turning Small Talk into Big Talk received. And it's on it's a how-to manual. Sort of like that thing you keep in your glove box in your car in the event that the tire needs to be changed or there's a light on, you don't know what to do, or you can't make the map work. Turning small talk into big talk is what you pull out before you have a big dinner or a big sit down with people that you would like to actually have a meaningful conversation with without coming to blows, not getting angry, but maybe getting some good stuff done. Maybe actually having a conversation with your family or your brothers, your sisters, your uncles, your aunts, your cousins that you've never had before, and you can conduct it, maybe find common ground, maybe just explore differences and do so in a way that isn't insulting. It's a fabulous book, and you can order it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or you can go to jansbooks.com. 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 Or Amazon, Turning Small Talk into Big Talk. And you'll be glad you did before a week from yesterday, Thanksgiving dinner. Let me also remind you I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and I'm always got my Relief Factor handy. I am doing the long drive and taking care of Tree Trunk Teddy tomorrow. Used to call him T-Rex Teddy when he was smaller. Now he's bigger, so he's a tree trunk. And that boy is built. He's made of granite. And his 6-year-old sister, Genghis Kate, is fast. So I am challenged to be nimble and to be strong. And I usually come back from these babysitting days when I fill in a little bit bruised, a little bit wounded, more than a bit tired. But Relief Factor goes with me and gets me through it, and you can start today for $19.95. That's their starter pack. All right, $19.95. It's less than $1 a day. They'll send you a 3-week supply in a bag that looks just like this if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. And you leave it somewhere like I do in the studio, and I take my Relief Factor in the first hour of the show every day. You see me do it on the news channel. You hear me do it on the radio stations across the United States. And I swear by it. I've been taking it for almost 13 years. The only supplement I've taken in more than 20 years. Not generally a supplement guy. Take my vitamin, of course, whatever my doctor tells me I need to take. But I'm not much of a supplement guy. And my daughter's on a creatine crusade, and I really keep waving her off on that. Not sure that's for me. But I know Relief Factor is for me, and it's for you too. The 3-week starter pack. You take 3 packets a day for the first week, 2 packets a day for the second, then 1 packet a day. Then you're on maintenance for as long as you want. And I'm telling you, you'll never stop when that goes away. When your tennis elbow, your bad back, your bad neck, your achy knees, whatever it is that bothers you, Relief Factor is the answer. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. 1-800-4RELIEF, or go to their website, relieffactor.com. relieffactor.com. Americans for Prosperity, one of our great sponsors, and they have an organization with which they partner and with which they align, which is Concerned Veterans for America, which you can find at cv, the number 4a.org. cv, the number 4a.org. And their boss, John Vick, Executive Director of the Concerned Veterans for America, joins me. John, welcome. When AFP said, hey, talk to John about the Access Act, I got to confess, I don't know anything about it. I'm a civilian. Tell me about it.
Yes, sir. Well, that's why I'm here. The Veterans Access Act is a landmark piece of legislation that's really going to improve veterans' quality of life in terms of how they receive not just health care, but also mental health care, right? So how they take care of their minds and bodies. One of the fundamental issues with post 9/11 veterans, we have all these new veterans in the system, is sometimes wait times to get care at a VA hospital can be really, really long, right? And so what the Veterans Access Act does is codify community care access standards so that you can go down the street to the same place the rest of your family gets their health care if you need to, so you don't end up waiting for a long time. And I would say apart from that, just the other really exciting news for us is it includes pilot programs for full choice on mental health and substance abuse care, right? So veterans that might be dealing with things like post-traumatic stress disorder or military sexual trauma or dealing with a substance abuse issue like alcoholism or drug use. Oftentimes the window to get help for those things is a day or two, right? You don't necessarily have 65 days that you can wait to get your appointment. And so whether it's at a VA hospital or at a minute clinic, right? As soon as you're ready for help, you ought to be able to get it. And this law makes sure that VA has your back.
John, who would be opposed to this? Obviously, I think vets are beloved in the United States, and everybody knows the VA has got problems. Who in the world would be opposed to this?
Yeah, well, I think, unfortunately, over time, you have sort of knee-jerk political reactions anytime you talk about taking a government-run healthcare system and putting more of the control in the private sector, right? And so this debate goes all the way back to the origins of Obamacare, and essentially, I think there are good faith arguments that some people have made where, like, well, what if a veteran gets help outside of the VA system and then the VA does need to work on them later on? Are they going to have those records? But at the end of the day, those are the same issues that the rest of the U.S. healthcare industry addresses all the time with records, transport, that sort of thing. So none of the problems.
John, years ago,
yeah.
I had an intern, and he had done tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he couldn't sleep. He had PTS. I could not get him an appointment at the VA. I called senators and congressmen. I could not get it done. That's how bad the system was. It was. Yeah. I was astonished.
Yeah, no, it's really incredible. And the doctors and nurses that work at the VA are really, really good people, and the vast majority of them do really great work. But the VA is a leviathan bureaucratic organization, right, with huge amounts of overhead. And so you do have pain points in the system. And at the end of the day, it's not about the dollars that we spend, right? Throwing more money at it doesn't necessarily fix a bureaucracy, right? What we need to be focused on is service delivery to veterans. And that if you give them more choice, they will get those services for sure.
Now, is there within the VA, an institutionalized capture that they resist any innovation? That is the case with a lot of government agencies. I just don't know the VA. I think Secretary Collins is a good man, so I assume he's trying to push back on that. But is that a problem, capture?
It is, yeah. I mean, and this battle goes back to 2018 when we got the Mission Act passed. It was a landmark piece that CVA also worked on, which introduced community care. And once COVID hit, and then you had the Biden administration, you basically had a lot of bureaucrats at the VA that kind of viewed community care as, well, that means we can't do our job. And that's really not the case, right? The VA is huge, but it's about 170 medical centers. The United States is a very, very big place, and there are millions of veterans to serve. So there's just a lot of situations where it makes a lot more sense financially as well for veterans to use the private sector. It's really just a matter of, in the military, it's the difference between you may, which is what the Mission Act was, and you shall, which is delivered with a knife hand. Veterans do have this right. Congress has made this promise. The Veterans Access Act will make sure that it happens.
I want people to learn more about it at C as in Charlie, V as in Victor, the number 4, A as in Albert.org. CV4A.org. That's Concerned Veterans for America. CV4A.org. John Vick, thank you for spending time with us to tell us about this, and we'll try and get people to go over to CV4A.org. CV4A.org. Doug Lesmerises is with us. He is the co-host of the Bill and Doug Show, I think the finest college football show available at Substack. And he has a double duty this weekend. He's got to tell us about the Friday football forecast for this weekend. And since we're not broadcasting live next Friday, he has to kind of look ahead a little bit at that game that looms out there larger than an iceberg. So, Doug, take it away.
Yeah, so Hugh, it's kind of weird in college football this week because, as you noted, we have great rivalry week next week for Thanksgiving. This week, the top 10 teams in the college football playoff rankings, 3 of those 10 are off. 5 of those 10 are favored by 30 points or more in their games, including Ohio State versus Rutgers. This is blowout city this weekend. So there's not a lot of great games. There's 2 to really keep your eye on. One is number 7 Oregon versus number 15 USC. That's at Oregon. The other is number 8 Oklahoma and number 21 Missouri. Now, Oregon and Oklahoma both in playoff spots right now, but if they lose before the end of the regular season, they might be knocked out. USC, if with the win over Oregon, would have a chance to maybe squeeze into one of those playoff spots. Probably would. So those are the 2 games where you really have some stakes. Meanwhile, Ohio State and Texas A&M and Alabama and Notre Dame and Georgia, they're just trying to see if they're going to win by 30 or 40 or 50 or 60. So it is kind of a weird weekend this weekend, Hugh. And that, I mean, you want me to talk Ohio State, Michigan? I can talk Ohio State, Michigan 365 days a year.
How hard is it not to talk about Ohio State, Michigan with only 10 days to go to get the monkey off the back of the state of Ohio?
Yeah, I mean, it's been looming over everything, Hugh, because I've said this a lot about Ohio State this year. This is the defending national champion. This is the undefeated number 1 team in the country. In that aspect, Hugh, they're on top of the sport. But Ohio State has also lost 4 straight games to its heated and hated rival, the Michigan Wolverines. So I cannot think of another team in modern North American sports history who simultaneously was that far up in one regard and that far down in another regard. So this balance, Hugh, it's really hard to get your head wrapped around it. Michigan plays Maryland this week. Michigan has some injuries. Ohio State plays Rutgers. Their 2 best receivers for Ohio State are injured. The main thing for Ohio State, Michigan this weekend is to get as healthy as possible for next weekend.
Hey, question. Did you watch the tape? Did Julian Sand take a late hit on the program, on the play that dinged him up and he was into the 10? I thought it was a late hit.
Yeah, it was. Probably. I mean, it's hard anymore, Hugh, that we protect the quarterback so much that it's like sometimes feels like they're calling everything. If you breathe on a quarterback, you're getting a 15-yard penalty. But yeah, maybe. But so he was limping around a little bit with the ankle last week. But Ryan Day asked about him this week. Said he's fine. Said he's been practicing. He'll be good to go. Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, they're 2 great receivers. probably won't go against Rutgers, and they'll hope they're healthy for Michigan. And Michigan's best running back is out for the year. Their second best running back, Jordan Marshall, who has 4 straight 100-yard games. He hurt his shoulder last week. I wouldn't be surprised if he sits this week to make sure they have him for the Buckeyes.
Is there any other college team in America, Doug, that is reliant on their skill players, say, 3 of them, saying Tate and Smith, as Ohio State is on their 3 skill players?
You know, maybe Indiana at number 2 would come close. You know, that Fernando Mendoza, their quarterback, is certainly one of the Heisman frontrunners. You saw Omar Cooper Jr. is the receiver for Indiana who made that ridiculous catch in the back of the end zone to win the Penn State game. But Elijah Surratt, who's their leading receiver, has been hurt for the last couple games, and they've been okay. Probably not. You know, probably not since the Washington team that lost to Michigan in the national title game a couple years ago that had Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and a great passing game. Nobody throws it quite like Ohio State, and they are defined by that. That's what they need to do in the Michigan game, is throw the ball around, which is why they need to get those 2 superstar receivers healthy and back on the field.
And do we think that there is a trade-off between Smith and Sayin in the Heisman voting? I mean, is that going to split the vote? Yeah. I don't know how it works. I do not know how it works.
Yeah. It's hard because when you vote for the Heisman, I've been a Heisman voter for about a decade, very lucky to be one of those voters. You vote for 3. So you just rank 1, 2, 3. The winner gets, your number 1 person gets 5 points. The next gets 3 points. The next gets 1 point. They tally it up. They invite 4 people to New York as the Heisman finalists. We've seen multiple players from the same team go to New York. It is possible. I think it's hard to win that way. And with Jeremiah Smith, he did play last week, but he was limited. He didn't play in the second half. He was really creaky walking off the field. Looked like there was something maybe with the back or a hamstring. If he doesn't play this week, I think it maybe swings it toward Julian Sayin as that candidate. It's just really difficult, but it's kind of still open. I think it's going to come down to 2 weeks from now, championship weekend. The one guy to watch in the Heisman conversation, Hugh, and we've talked about this team a little bit this year. I know you like when we bring them up. Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is playing Pitt this week in a game. It's only a 3-point game. Georgia Tech, if they win, they're on track to make the ACC championship game. Let me tell you about their quarterback, Haynes King. Kind of single-handedly carrying them lately. The last 2 weeks, Hugh, Haynes King has accounted for 935 yards of offense in 2 games. That's throwing and running. So if Georgia Tech wins the ACC, maybe he scoots in there to the Heisman conversation. But I still think it's probably down to Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza, the Indiana quarterback.
I love the name, though, King. Quick exit. Yeah. Do we have an NFL game that we care about greatly?
Yeah. So the Indianapolis Colts have had an amazing season. They're 8-2. We wind up talking about the Chiefs a lot, Hugh. They lost last week to Denver. Indianapolis at Kansas City this week. Kansas City is 5-5. Indianapolis is 8-2. Kansas City is favored at home by about a field goal. So this is a real test. The standard in the AFC and the new best team this year in the AFC, Colts versus Chiefs, is a big one.
Is there anything on Thanksgiving that we can watch?
There's a bunch of NFL games. Like college doesn't go there really anymore. College is more. There's gonna be a bunch on Friday, Black Friday after Thanksgiving. We'll get the 3 games on Thanksgiving for the NFL, so you'll have plenty of football to watch while you're eating your bird.
Have a great Thanksgiving, Doug. We'll talk to you on Monday. The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe, is here. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. You know, sometimes I jump on a story before it's even dry, the ink is even dry, and sometimes I let it percolate. This is one that percolated. Throughout the years, I've tried to stay 100 million miles from everything and anything about the Epstein files. And if you feel the way I do, the lesson you should learn, such people are like lava. Touch them and you burn. He lived a life of influence, but one that was so sordid, it's hard to comprehend by such wealth he was rewarded. It's hard to think in livelihoods, competitive and stressful, that someone so soul-damaged could be so darn successful in drawing to his circle, and riders on his flights, the who's who of a city in his web of acolytes. I've heard that piles of money are odoriferous and warm, and left out in the open, around them flies will swarm. It's said the root of evil is cupidity and such. I'm glad for that one reason that I don't have very much. But was it only money that brought us to this hour? Perhaps much more enticing is the arrogance of power. He surely was a villain, like one we meet in fables, but he may have bent the river that finally cleans the stables. That's J.E. by T.J. Tarzana Joe.
J.E. by T.J. You know, we were talking about him earlier on the program. Did you know that he had outflows from his accounts, not inflows, outflows from his accounts of about $1.8 billion? And in the salaciousness, people have overlooked the fact, boy, that sounds like money laundering to a lot of people. He's a bad guy. There are bad people in the world.
Bad stuff. It sounds like bad stuff, but does it all come out? Does it all come out in the open? Let's see. I mean,
we will see. I don't know. I'm more fixed on. I'm hoping you're already working on your debut poem for Shedeur Sanders, who starts for the Cleveland. I'm wearing on Fox today my Cleveland Browns tie in honor of the fact that the 42nd starting quarterback since the Browns returned in 1999. 26 years ago, this will be their 42nd starter. Joe, do you think this is the one?
The 42nd time's the charm, you.
Yeah, just saying. We might need a poem for the. You might put that on your board.
I was working.
Shedeur Sanders rhymes with Band-Aids. No, I don't. Yes, it does. But you work on that. TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com. Don't use that anymore. Just go to TarzanaJoe.com. On the website, there's a button that says "Need a Poem," and you will see J.E. by T.J. Will that already be posted, Joe?
It is. It is.
J.E. by T.J. at TarzanaJoe.com. But if you need a poem for a wedding, Christmas party, New Year's Eve celebration, farewell party, retirement, you can get it. Rates are reasonable. No AI allowed at TarzanaJoe.com.